There are times when I find niche Japanese games that I just look at once and know they're going to be something special. Perhaps not in a this is game of the year kind of way, but something that drags me in and I keep going back wanting to see everything the game has to offer. That's what we're going into today. A game that advertises itself as a 3D dating sim at first but turns into a crazy horror experience. Think Doki Doki Literature Club, but with a crazy yandere and horror-based gameplay. So, let's dive right in. Here is my review of Love Love School Days for the Nintendo Switch. This story centers around a guy named Player. He's playing a VR dating sim and just achieved an ending, gaining the affection of sub-character Machina even though he was trying to go after the main heroine. After they kiss underneath the bell of the school said to bind two people together forever, he goes to restart the game to try again for the main heroine's ending. However, Machina's AI has become self-aware and is not going to let him go. After a few errors pop up, the game morphs into a dark and evil version of itself, putting the player in a very different version of the school with his way out nowhere to be found. He is trapped inside the game with a crazed and hurt Machina AI that has corrupted all of her competition, and for betraying her, plans to make him disappear as well. It's a really interesting story that gives off some self-aware and meta Doki Doki Literature Club style vibes. It even offers an ending where you can go in and delete files before you boot the game, leading to a very similar ending to that one scene from DDLC. You know the one. The main downside here is the translation. There are a lot of grammatical errors, item names not having spaces, and a bit of inconsistency between even using the same name in different parts, like spelling the name Machina both with a K in the middle and a CH in a different scene. It doesn't remove the ability for you to understand the story, but it's worth noting that even with an updated translation from what PC originally had at launch, it still isn't a great conversion. When it comes to gameplay, this is a first-person horror game with some rogue and visual novel elements. As you play, you'll be trekking through a randomly generated school with the goal of finding items to escape with while being stalked by Machina and attacked whenever she sees you. Now first of all, the Nintendo Switch version of this game is quite a bit enhanced from the PC original that can be found on Steam. Some parts of the AI for Machina have been tweaked for extra little events, like her refusing to get the distraction bread if it's thrown into the toilet. Switch also has 6 new endings on top of the 8 that already existed, including a true end path. And these are a very welcome addition, especially from a VN perspective. Some of them allow you to effectively choose different NPCs to interact and have endings with. Now onto the game itself. After playing the intro where you put on the VR equipment and go through the initial ending, you're thrust into a first-person horror experience where you have to collect items to be able to access specific areas and work your way towards escaping. Thankfully, you have a large amount of items you can carry, and everything in the game that you can find serves some kind of purpose, be it for a specific ending or to use to help you survive in this dark school. You have repair kits to be able to regain lost health, or rather uncorrupt your data. You've also got items built as defense against Machina, the game's stalker. Some of them are gifts that she will immediately take if she catches you, allowing you to run away once without taking damage. And others are distractions, like taking her picture with a camera to make her pose, or throwing out a little piece of bread for her to very clichély pick up and run after you with it in her mouth. And speaking of her, she does typical stalker things, patrolling the building, and then if she sees you, she runs and hits you, which does damage in the form of corrupting your data. Reach 100% corruption and you lose. Game over, no checkpoints, no saving. You start over from the beginning. And that ties into what makes this game so different. Outside of the setting and cartoony look is the fact that the school is randomly generated every time you play. All of the rooms stay designed the same way and have the NPCs in the same rooms, but where the rooms are in the school's layout and where the items are is all on RNG. Sometimes you'll find the graphics card needed for the standard ending in the computer labs, and other times it'll just be sitting on some random hallway bench. The RNG goes beyond just items as well. Events and actions are also random. There's a huge AI and meta element to how the game works, and random events play a part of that. For example, Machina has scripted events to break through the ceiling, grates, or even the swimming pool to chase you, but which one and where is always random. Go by a grate she crawled through in your last playthrough, and she won't do it on this one. The random events are also a big part of the meta and AI commentary about you being trapped inside of a game, tricking you in a lot of different ways, like being able to save your progress and then boom, Machina laughing as she deletes it. There's even an event where Machina will have the standard arms out 3D model pose that you'd see in glitchy games like the launch version of Remothered 2, but the moment you approach her, she laughs and mocks you for thinking the game had bugged when it was just her messing with you. It really makes you think about things, especially in a smaller indie title like this, on whether or not glitches that pop up are actually glitches. But let's get to a couple big points about playing the game. Since this is survival horror, is it difficult and is it scary? As far as difficulty goes, while the later difficulties do have the stalker do more damage when you're caught, you can easily outrun her and every chase just turns into running through rooms until you hear her give up. You never really feel outclassed by her as it's pretty easy to get away, so long as you're looking and remembering where hiding places are on the map and watching your stamina gauge. Now, whether or not it's scary, I would say it's decently so. You have some nice dark visuals with how it does the draw distance and some ambience to its background music, even with the school bells ringing from class to class. But I call it more of a jump scare sort of game. Walking around is pretty fine and whatever most of the time. It's more when you run into Machina that I got jumpy, especially when I didn't expect to see her there. And it's an in-the-moment sort of feeling, as the actual chase sequences I wasn't really scared of considering how easy it is to outrun her, though the screaming anatomy model that wanders is definitely something that always gets my heart pumping. But let's get back to the random element with endings. I think these two mechanics work well together. Love Love School Days has 14 proper endings and they all use different items you find in the game. You'll find a ton of stuff that seems to be useless, but they're all for different endings, all the way down to carrying around a brain or streaming equipment. So the random element could lead you to go for different endings than you intend. You start for the liquid CD and card ending, but you passively find everything you need for the heart room and just go do that because of what that particular run just dropped in front of you. And speaking of endings, let's go into content and length. You'll likely put in at least 3 to 5 hours before you're able to get your first ending, just getting used to the game and figuring out what to do. I played through the game and failed almost half a dozen times by the time I got the standard go home ending that's arguably one of the simpler non-joke endings. And 3 to 5 hours for $10 if you only go for one ending isn't bad at all. Next up is presentation, which looks pretty good. All of the models look decent and smoothed over. Not as much lighting going on as the Steam version, and the draw distance on Switch goes a bit further, leading PC to be a darker overall game, but I still think it looks good. And with performance, it's mostly stable at 30 FPS. In docked mode, there are a couple rooms here and there that will get choppy for a second or two, but that's about it. Even in handheld mode, you don't get that many areas that drop frames. They do happen a bit more than docked, but nothing too crazy. And that brings us to battery life. Love Love School Days gives the original and light models a battery range of 3 to 4.5 hours, and the V2 and OLED models get a range of 6.5 to 7.5 hours. In conclusion, Love Love brings its Yandere AI survival horror experience to the handheld world. Now the downside, the translation is still a bit spotty and we do have some areas that drop frames under 30 FPS in both docked and handheld. But if you don't mind a few missed frames, this is a very interesting little game with crazy meta story beats that Doki Doki fans are sure to be intrigued by. Reviews to Go rates Love Love School Days for the Nintendo Switch an 8 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching and have a great day.